while you're talking about complexity of these devices, right, I was also thinking of like from general security team that may be helping organizations who are in the IoT domain secure that, or even attack that, because we do that through both attacking and securing those. The complexity is high in this case, and one of the reasons why the complexity is high is that there is such a diversity of these devices, right? They may be from different the components may be from different OEMs, different manufacturers, which contribute it to the final place of assembly, where again these IoT products are eventually assembled with all of these different components, and then some from these organizations as well that are creating these products for us. And that involves a lot of unique software, firmware, different kind of security features which may not be enabled for these firmwares and all of that forms the final product. And that is what leads to a lot of complexity. Particularly, I'm coming from the firmware standpoint. Now, if you are an organization that is creating this end device or product, how would you go about managing security for such ecosystems?
All right. Yeah. So very, very interesting question, and to the point, I must say, because this is one of the core problem statements for at least as far as connected devices go, because every component will have its own software or firmware, as you whatever you want to call it. And then you would have certain components that software components that you would buy from other things. So when you're creating a final product, how do you keep track of this? So one of the things now what is happening is on the compliance and regulation side, where governments have also come up with regulations, and there are also alliances formed, domain specific alliances, as well as security standards. So what happens is, if there is like a tiny chip that has a use case specific for automotive, for example, it will still fall through the automotive cybersecurity standard. So the car manufacturer at the end, for example, Tesla or Maruti, or I don't know, will have to follow these standards. But it's not just the car manufacturers; it's also the component manufacturers who have to follow. And this is uh, quite common in some of the domains, but not so common in some of the domains. But the good thing is that the standards are almost here now. We have different standards. The other problem that we are seeing from a use case or a perspective, when we speak to some of our customers who use our products, is some of the large organizations. What they're doing is, when they're procuring devices from vendors which will go into their infrastructure, be it whatever, cameras or fingerprint machine, whatever it is, they have a red team specifically to do security assessments of these devices, and then based on the vulnerabilities identified, they will either go ahead with the vendor, inform the vendor of the issues, or reject the vendor at all. Uh, so not only are the vendors looking at the security of this, but even the enterprises who are taking the products from these vendors interested in at least doing one round of security assessment. And the problem persists because there were no standards earlier which would govern the security, where the vendor can come and say, hey, I am under this regulation, you can see I've got certified. So at every chain, people are doing their job. It's just that it was domain specific till now. For example, medical, in medical, you have high security standards because you need to meet FDA requirements. In consumer tech, it was like, man, I'm just making a camera, right? What happens if my camera or my smart lock doesn't work?
Who cares? Yeah.
Yeah, who cares? So people started finding vulnerabilities around these devices, and then they started demonstrating the impact depending on how these devices are placed, right? A smart camera at home may not be a very, very critical device, obviously, yeah, critical for the family, who owns it, but versus a smart camera deployed in a bank at a locker room, right? So the use case of the devices will also used to govern how what is the impact of vulnerabilities, which is now changing for good for us as well, because now we can easily sell our services and products. But I think it was needed.
Yeah, I think don't want to slip in this one, but I think this compliance actually drives a lot of this in all the domains, not just IoT. And yeah, that's something that as a technical security person, as an individual, you realize much later, I think, how much of a role compliance and regulations and standards have to play in driving some of this. But that's one side of the things. Like, for example, if you are trying to configure things securely, follow certain standards, guidelines when you are working with these devices. But the other side is, okay, now you have done all of that, you followed these standards and done this. And then comes the part where you're maintaining these. And many times I have seen, having, worked for some of these other organizations, IoT organizations also, that many times the firmwares are not updated. And that is the reason, not necessarily because the custom code was, there was some line of code that was an issue, but in general, they've not been upgraded or updated. They're not kept maintained over a period of time, which are the low-hanging fruits from an attacker's perspective.